What's up, everybody? Today I'm going to be walking you through a fun project. It's to build a bookcase with cubbies. I actually was looking for something like this. I've got a lot of camera gear and little knickknacks and small pieces, and they're kind of just stacked on a bookcase somewhere. I figured it'd be easier to have all these small cubbies so that I could organize them and then mount this on the wall. This bookcase here is actually designed so you don't need that complex of tools. You could just use a saw, a hammer, and some nails and create this. So you don't have to invest in miter saws and expensive types. So the saw I'm going to be using today is going to be a compound miter saw. It's just because I have it. It'll make nice, clean, easy cuts. I don't got to worry about squaring things up too much. But the way that I'm designing this particular build, you can use a circular saw. It could be a little bitty circular saw as well. You could probably get away with using a square box back saw if you wanted to as well. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to get it aligned. But again, I'm keeping this very simple so that you can build it with the most basic tools. So when it comes to materials, what you're going to need is, well, what I'm using is 1x4s. These are 4 feet in length. When it comes to the 1x4x4s, you're going to need 6 of them. In addition, you're going to need a measuring tape, or I'm going to be using a ruler here, of course, to measure my cuts. You're going to want to get a square, especially if you're working with a circular saw instead of a miter saw like I am. If you have a miter saw, you can kind of get away without using this. And then as far as assembling, you're going to need some finishing nails. These are 1 1/4 inch finishing nails. You could use screws, but for something this small, you don't need anything that hardcore. It's mounting hardware, which is these L brackets I use in another video. Now, there's some screws that are included in that. The screws that come with it are okay to mount directly into the wood, but when you go to mount these things into your sheetrock, we're going to have to use anchors and sheetrock screws. So when it comes to mounting the bookcase on the wall, you're going to need a handful of tools as well. You're going to need a level. It doesn't have to be this big, but you're going to need a level. You're going to need a drill. This is with a Phillips head bit. And you're going to need 2 smaller bits. A 1/8 bit, a 1/8 inch, and a 5/32 would work great. You're going to need a Shorty Phillips head screwdriver, the screws that came with your L brackets. You're going to need some easy anchors. That's to mount and anchor to the sheetrock. And you're going to need some sheetrock screws, ideally 1 5/8 inch. These are 2 inch, but that's all I got. And note that for this particular install, we're not going into the studs. We're just going into the sheetrock. Now, in order to not discriminate against people who have miter saws, the next few minutes are going to cover a side-by-side comparison of the cuts and the measurements you're going to be making with both versions. If you're using a miter saw, the next cuts will require you to make them at 45 degrees. Mitre Saw users will also be measuring a 24-inch length. In total, you will have 4 pieces cut at 24 inches. Mitre Saw users will also need to measure 22 9/16 inches, and these will be straight cuts. You will need a total of 2 pieces, again, straight cuts. If you're working with a circular saw, you're going to measure 24 inches. Circular saw users will only need 2 cuts at 24 inches. Circular saw users will then need to measure 22 9/16 inches. You're going to need a total of 4 pieces at this length. Also be sure to use a square when drawing your line so that it's perfectly perpendicular. And remember, miter saw users will be cutting 45 degrees on the 24 inches pieces of wood. Only those for the outer frame. Circular saw users, everything's going to be a square cut. When it comes to assembling the frame, those of us using miter saws will be joining them at 45 degrees. Circular saw users will be aligning them as a square joint. 2 of the pieces measured 22 9/16 will be placed between the 24-inch length, which will make up the uprights. This is important to add the correct amount of support to the shelf. And if you're working with the 45-degree angles, I highly suggest getting some framing tools in order to help you square up the frame before you nail it together. They make this step a whole lot easier. Once you have your corner aligned, you're going to use 3 framing nails to hold it together. You will then repeat the process on all 4 corners to build out your frame. Once your frame is built out, the instructions from here will be exactly the same regardless of the type of saw you're using. In order to simplify the spacing of all the cubbies and shelves, I suggest that you cut 3 blocks to be used as templates. The measurements will be 6 and 15/16, 6 inch, and then 4 and 1/8. The 6 and 15/16 inch block will be used to install the shelving that goes across the length of the bookcase. This will require the 2 remaining pieces that are cut at 22 and 9/16. They will be installed inside the frame and spaced evenly. Begin by fitting the 2 pieces of wood inside of the frame. The 6 and 15/16 inch template that you cut will then be used to evenly space those shelves out. You should also hold the template in place when you're nailing in the finishing nails. This will ensure that you're nailing it in the right position. Slide the template to the other side of the shelf. This will ensure that it's properly aligned. And once again, keep the template in place while you're securing it with the finishing nails. The template will now be used to space the next shelf and also to properly align it when you're securing it with the finishing nails. Repeat this process to secure the shelves in place on both sides of the bookcase. If your measurements are spot on, the template should easily slide between the shelves anywhere on the bookcase. Ensuring that the spacing is correct is important because you'll be using some blocks to build out the cubbies. You will need a total of 10 pieces of wood that are cut at 6 and 15/16 length. The 6 inch and the 4 and 1/8 inch blocks that you cut earlier will come into play when spacing out the cubbies. The 10 blocks that we just cut will now be spaced between all of the shelving to build out the cubbies. 3 of them will be installed on the top shelf and will be spaced using the spacers that you created. The spacing is alternated as shown in this diagram. Insert the 6 inch spacer into the top shelf, and then the first block that you cut will be aligned with it. Then you'll take the 4 and 1/8 block and you'll place it next, and use it to space the next piece that's going in. Repeat with the 4 and 1/8 inch block to build out the last placement. And just like before, the templates are useful to help hold your blocks in position when you nail them in with the finishing nails. This will help ensure that they're in the right position and properly squared out. And during this step, you'll be inserting the nails on both sides of the blocks that are being put in. To get to the opposite side of the bookcase, it can be helpful to stand it on end. The first shelf is done. 4 pieces of wood will now be used to build out the second shelf. These will all be evenly spaced out at 4 and 1/8. And note that the cubbies are not aligned to allow us to place the finishing nails on both ends of each piece of wood. Use the 4 and 1/8 inch spacer to evenly space out all of the cubbies that are going into the second shelf. And once again, use the template to hold each of the pieces of wood in place while you nail it in with finishing nails to ensure that they're properly aligned. The third and final shelf will follow the same pattern that we used on the first shelf. Once again, you will be alternating between the 6 inch and the 4 and 1/8 inch spacers to space out the cubbies on this shelf. Use the spacers as a template and secure with the finishing nails. At this point, the shelf is fully assembled and now needs to be mounted using the L brackets. Okay, so to level, we're going to put our level, right? You make sure your bubble's in the middle, and then you're going to draw your line. That's the line where the L brackets are going to go. Okay, so the next step now is there's your line, and I jumped ahead, but I'm going to show you anyways. You take an L bracket, and the bend is going to be at that line, like this. So you're going to align the bend with the L bracket, and then you're going to draw the circle, and that's where you're going to drill. You're going to repeat that with every anchor that has to go in. So now you're going to take a drill bit, and I'm using a 5/32. You can use something similar as long as your wall anchors that we're going to be using, the pit tip will fit in the hole that you drill with this. Let me go ahead and drill it out. Now we're going to take one of the easy anchors, this guy, and we're going to put it in there. Push it in, and then drill it in. And then we're going to do this for every single anchor point. So now you're going to use the sheetrock screws that we talked about to secure the L bracket into the wall. Okay, and as you can see, pretty good. I'm at the line, so this is still level. And again, that's exactly how we're going to do that with all of our anchor points. Okay, so the anchor points we're going to start off with, side by side, these are going to hold your bookcase on top. You got some flexibility where you want to put. Once you get your bookcase set onto the anchor points, onto the L brackets here, you're going to take a pencil and you're going to draw in the eyelets for the L brackets. Another thing we're going to do is we're going to put a line at the bottom down here. And the reason is we're going to add another L bracket down here. So we're going to put an additional bracket down here just to kind of help hold the weight and ensure it doesn't sag later on. And we're going to follow the same steps as last time to put the L bracket in. You're also going to draw a circle on the little L bracket we put down here. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take a small bit. This bit is a 1/8, and you're just going to pre-drill a small hole in the middle of the dot that we made. And you're going to repeat this in all of the dots that you made, the 2 on the top and the 1 on the bottom.
The screws that came packed with the L brackets will now be used to secure the bookcase to the brackets that are mounted to the wall.
Now you use your shorty, and we're going to drill that, well, hand tighten the screw in place. And we're just going to go hand tight. These screws are just to keep the bookshelf from sliding off the wall. The actual support is from the anchors and the sheetrock screws we put in a second ago. And we're going to repeat with all of the anchor points on the bookcase.
Once you have the bookcase bolted to the wall, the installation is completed. And keep in mind that the design I gave you can be customized any way you want. So if you're looking for a cool design to display all of your knickknacks, or my junk, as my wife calls it, this is a good option for you.